welcome everybody. So first of all, a very happy new year. Last year we all had a tremendous year. Hopefully this year might be one which would be much better than last year. Now one of the major reasons why we came up with this video is we have a lot of students who contacted us talking about the CLAT notification once it was out, and they had again a concern about what exactly is the pattern. Now there is no difference in the pattern. It is exactly the same which was there last year. But then still we thought about having another session and another video again, decrypting the entire pattern all over again. And also another question which they came up was, most of the board examination, in fact all the 12 standard board examinations have been postponed, and the days which they have, they just finish up with their boards and you come up with your entrance exam. So pretty much confused, how are you exactly going to study? Don't you worry about the same. So in this video we are exactly going to cover the overall overview of the UG 5-year CLAT 2021 examination. We'll be talking about the paper format and the syllabus for the same, and along with the same we will also be talking about the important skills and abilities required to actually crack this examination, because this is not a memory-based exam anymore. It's a completely skill-based examination. At the same time, we will also be talking about the strategy for cracking out this particular CLAT 2021 examination, especially with respect to the upcoming board examination and building up a balance between the boards and your entrance examination. So without wasting much time, let's quickly get on to the overview of your actual CLAT paper. Now this is something which we took it out exactly from the consortium's website. So first of all, your paper is going to be a multiple choice paper. It's going to be 150 questions with 1 mark each. So maximum you have 150 marks. The duration of the paper remains the same. It is still 120 minutes, that is 2 hours. So earlier the paper was of 200 marks and now it is of 150 marks. The number of questions have reduced, the number of marks have reduced, however the duration remains the same, and it still has the same negative marking, which is you have a 0.25 negative marking for every wrong answer. Now does it mean that it is much more easier? It's the way you have to take it. Now let me take you in detail with each section. Now CLAT as a paper is divided between 5 sections. So I have the sections, and we will also talk about the number of questions which are being asked in these sections. So the 5 sections are your English language, current affairs, which includes GK, legal reasoning, logical reasoning, quantitative techniques. Now in English language you have near about 28 to 32 questions, which is approximately again the 20% of the paper. Current affairs, again you have 35 to 39 odd questions, which compromises of 25% of the paper. Legal reason comprises of 35 to 40 questions, again 25% of the paper. So if you look at that, the major 2 elements is current affairs including GK and legal reasoning, which comprises of 25% each. At the same time, when you look at logical reasoning, you have 28 to 32 questions, on an average 30 questions, which is again 20% of the paper. And quantitative technique again has somewhere around 13 to 15 or 17 odd questions, which is going to be again 10% of the paper. Now the weightage of this particular paper did not change. If you look at the old pattern, when it was 200 questions, it was still the same. English had 20% weightage, GK or current affairs has 25%, legal reasoning had 25%, logical reasoning had 20%, and again quantitative technique had 10% of the overall paper. So that weightage did not change. However, the number of questions asked in the entire paper, that got changed. Now let me take you through each section one by one, wherein we can discuss and talk about like how are these weightages, what exactly are they going to be asking. Now the entire paper is a comprehensive based paper. Now what does that exactly mean? Now what the board or the consortium wants to actually check, the skills and your abilities actually required to be a law aspirant is something they're trying to check. So what they are initially looking at is they want to know your comprehension and your reading skills. They would love to understand your analytical abilities, how well you can analyze things. They also want to understand a bit of your aptitude skills. At the same time, a deep and thorough understanding about your critical thinking skills. Along with the same, it is always good to have your general awareness abilities in place. Now, many times we have heard that prior knowledge is not required to crack this kind of a paper, but we will talk about it. So this paper is actually testing these skills. So based on these skills is what the entire paper is made of. So it is completely a comprehensive, analytical aptitude, a critical thinking paper wherein some part of general awareness is still required. If I further break down these into each sections, so I missed out one more point, which was like in the mathematical section, you still need your interpretation skills and your quick calculation abilities also. Now, let's talk about each section. For example, English, which has 20% weightage. With 20% weightage, they are going to be asking you near about 6 or 7 odd passages. Each passage comprising of 450 words each. That means it's going to be too much of reading. At the same time, what are these passages going to be from? They are going to be something like a contemporary or historic significant events, fictions and non-fiction writings which you need to read. But the standard of this entire passage or article which would be coming up, it is going to be of the same 12th standard student. If I look about the overall timing which a particular person would need to solve it, then it should not be more than 5 to 7 minutes to read a passage and to solve the questions which would be there. So one passage, it might have near about 4 or 5 questions for that one particular passage. But in that questions, they would be trying to test the abilities from your end to demonstrate entire comprehension and your language skills. So there would be questions which they would be asking you on the main idea of the passage. What is the author trying to exactly express in that particular passage? The author or the examiner might need to test and compare and contrast the different arguments and the viewpoints expressed in the particular passage. The inferences and the conclusions that can be drawn out of that particular passage. Along with the same time, the overall summary of the passage and how well can you summarize that entire passage. And meanings of different words, vocabulary is something which they would be testing. So majorly in English section, these would be the type of questions which they would be asking, and this is exactly what the consortium or the board wants to test, or the abilities they want to check through this particular section. At the same time, if I look at current affairs and GK, which is one of the highest or greatest weightage section. So in this section, again, we have passages which comprises of near about 400 to 450 words each. Near about 5 to 7 odd passages would be something which would be there. Now these passages would include news articles, there would be journalistic sources, it can be from non-fiction, it can even be from legal updates. In fact, there can also be some passages which may include legal informations or knowledge from the legal industries. So you need to have a thorough understanding about all of these areas. Because most of the passages which we saw, it is just not only related to the passage. In the passage, from that particular significant event, they might even ask you questions pertaining to the static of that particular event. So along with the current affair, you may also require some bit of static information for these particular passages. And the questions which they might ask you, so again they would be testing your ability to demonstrate your awareness of various events, like for example the contemporary events of significance from India and the world. They can even ask you questions on arts and culture. They can even question you on international affairs which is happening around, especially with respect to the last year. There were too many incidents and events. You talk about the US elections, you talk about the pandemic, too many affairs which were there. And at the same time, historical events of continuing significance. That's where I was talking about the static information part. So they might be or they will be questioning you on the static of that particular significant event. So that is what GK and your current affairs section would comprise of. Now, legal, which most of the people think would be the scarier part of it. But if I look at the entire pattern, and if I want to talk about what exactly it would consist of, would be similar like the other areas, which would be 400 to 450 words passage. Here the number of questions are pretty high because we are talking about near about 36 to 40 questions, so there might be 7 to 8 odd passages. Now these passages may relate to facts, situations or scenarios involving legal matters, public policies or moral philosophical inquiries which are happening in this past 1 or 6 to 8 odd months. Now like I mentioned in the beginning, it is not required that you have a prior legal knowledge. However, what I would recommend is some knowledge of general awareness, especially with respect to contemporary legal or moral issues, is always better to apply these general principles or proportions to the given scenarios. Because what is going to happen is you have the passage given, but the questions are facts and scenario-based questions. So you have to infer the principle out of it. So if you have some bit of general information, some bit of general awareness about things, that is definitely going to be on your favor. So if I look at the kinds of questions which they ask, so passage would be definitely followed by a series of questions that will require you to identify and infer the rules and principles in the passage. At the same time, apply such rules and principles to various situations which is given through the questions. You also need to understand how changes to the rules or these principles may alter their application to the various facts and situations. So it is not exactly the law that used to come, or it's not exactly the principle-based questions that used to be there earlier. There used to be a principle, there used to be a fact situation, and then based on that you used to have options. But it would be more of from an understanding and a critical thinking level, more of a comprehension ability that would be required for this particular section. Along with the same, you have logical reasoning, wherein this is one section where the passage size is smaller. You only have 300 words passages. Again, you might have 4 to 5 passages. Again, in these passages, they would be critically analyzing the patterns of reasoning, how well you can reason, how well you can think, and assess how conclusions may depend on particular premises or evidences given in the passages. So if I have to look around the questions, the passage would again be followed by questions that will require you to recognize an argument in the passage and recognize a premise and its conclusions in the passages, how you can infer and apply what follows from the passage. At the same time, identify the logical flaws, the parallel reasoning from the passage, and identify contradictions and equivalences, and assess the effectivity of the entire argument in the passage. So if I have to holistically talk about this particular section, it's completely a critical thinking or a critical analysis what is required here. From a quant section, math section, ideally there is no direct maths into it. So it would be 4 to 5 short sets of facts or propositions, graphs, or other textual or pictorial or diagrammatic representations of numerical information provided to you. In short, it would be more of a data interpretation type. You will have the data given in these formats, in the format of sets. You have to interpret it well and try to solve questions. You will be required to derive informations and apply mathematical operations also on such informations. Now, when I talk about mathematical operations, most of it, almost 99% of it is completely based on 10th standard mathematics. So it should not be of that great challenge. The questions which actually come up in maths would be, or it would require you to derive or infer or manipulate with the numerical information sets. At the same time, you also need to comprehend the caselets, the graph, the other representations which are there, so that your data is not incorrect. Excuse me. And apply, like I said, various mathematical operations which were there. So all these various mathematical operations would be from a 10th standard mathematical operations level. If I have to name a couple of them, then it would be simple like percentages, ratio, proportion, variations, averages, time, speed, distance, etc. All of these things are something which you have already studied till your 10th standard. So it's something new that you need to create to get and solve some of these sets. What you would require is pure practice. Now, at the same time, since you have your boards in picture, now the biggest question that comes up is how to crack CLAT 2021 along with the boards. So, is that really that difficult to crack this particular examination? Then the answer is no. Now, let me show you a small strategy. So we are in January at the moment, and we have time till June. Right? June 13th is when CLAT examination is there, and IELTS is also on June 20th. So January till June is the period that we have. If I have to do some numerics onto it, this is almost 150 odd days. So that is almost equivalent to 3,600 hours, right? How much do you think is actually required from this 3,600 hours for CLAT? Some of you might come up with like 1,500, 2,000 or half of it. But ideally, for CLAT, what you require is just 500 hours. If you're able to give this 500 hours for the next 5 odd months, you can make it to NLUs. But those 500 hours has to be pretty crucial. Now, most of you might be thinking, how is this 500 hours going to work out? Let me show you something. Now, 500 hours taken across 5 months. I'm talking about from January till March, and March to your CLAT date, that is in June. This 500 hours, let me divide this 500 hours for you so that it becomes much more easier for you to imply that into your day-to-day life. Now, 500 hours, the first initial 200 hours, you have to dedicate it to the concepts of these 5 sections. Because if without concepts, if you directly jump on with practices, that may hinder and cost a lot of more time. So give out pure 200 hours from that 500 to the concepts of English, concepts of legal reasoning, concepts of GK, concepts of logical reasoning, and again concepts of maths, the mathematical technique which you had already learned. Along with the same part, you have seen that each section, whether that is English, whether that is GK, whether that is, for that matter, current affairs, legal reasoning, all of them, they have passages. That means you need to read. Almost if I combine all of them together, we are talking about reading somewhere around 15,000 to 16,000 odd words. That is pretty huge, right? In a span of 2 hours, if you have to sit and read almost 15,000, 16,000 words, then one, you need speed. Second, you need consistency. And that is something which is going to come only by reading. So you need to dedicate near about another 150 hours from this 500 hours for reading. You can read anything, in fact. Whatever you get it, just pick it up, start reading. It can be articles, it can be blogs, it can be newspaper, it can be periodicals, it can be magazines, it can be online, it can be a physical copy. You can try anything that you can read. Again, like I said, speed and consistency is what would be required. At the same time, are we done with concepts and reading? Then no. It is very important that we again test ourselves and understand that are we at the right track? Are we at the right track going ahead with the correct information? So we would also have to dedicate near about 150 odd hours for our mocks. You should minimum be solving at about 30 odd mocks. Now each paper is of 2 hours, but just solving mock will not help you. With the mocks, you would also need to do the analysis of that particular mock. Where did you go wrong? What actually was your strength? What was something which made the section weaker, so that you can study it, you can improve it. So 2 hours of your mock and 3 hours of an analysis of that mock. That makes it what? 5 hours per mock, and I'm talking about minimum 30 CLAT mocks. That's going to be 5 into 30, which is 150. So 200 hours for your concepts, 150 hours for your reading, 150 hours for your mock and analysis. That makes it 500 hours. Try and follow this out. It would ease out the pressure which you have it for your board and your entrance examination. And when I say 500 hours for 5 months, I'm talking about like 100 hours per month, and if I have further divided, then I'm be talking about like 4 weeks. Then per week I'm just talking about 25 hours. So probably if you have to divide something, it's not necessary that you need to exactly follow that same way, but then Monday to Friday, probably 2 to 3 hours for your CLAT, that should be enough. Maybe the day you are taking your mock, you need to spend that 5 odd hours, 2 hours of your mock and 3 hours of your analysis. Can be any 2 days of the week. You can try 5 hours, and at the same time, remaining days practice on your concepts which are coming up. So 25 hours per week is exactly what would be required. At the same time, let me also tell you, because the boards have been postponed, now most of the time Career Launcher always has their express batches, their crash courses, which is post-board. But this time we have come up with the boards, the crash courses a little bit earlier. So we have started our crash courses immediately. These kind of practices is something which we which we are trying to download to the students through the express batches, through our crash course batches also. So our crash course batches have started from 16 January onwards. People who are interested, there are weekend batches. So initially it is weekend, and slowly we will have few other days included onto the same. Post your board examination, there will be regular sessions, revision sessions, which would be happening onto the same. At the same part, most of y'all have your colleges ongoing. So we have a facility of having online classes, at the same time having an offline also. So if you are really interested in any of these things, feel free to contact us at the number which is given below, and you would be informed and guided accordingly. In case if you still have any other questions, feel free to contact me, write to me. This is my email ID and my number, or you can contact the number which you had seen earlier. And if you are interested for any of the courses or details, feel free to get in touch with us. All right, so good luck for your examinations and do best for your entrance too.